Video is on section 4-3, which is the quadratic formula. The key vocabulary is the discriminant. The essential question is, how do you solve quadratic equations by using the quadratic formula? Now, if you notice on the formula sheet that you've been provided that's given on the EOCT, the quadratic formula is on there, so you do not have to memorize this formula. It will be provided for you on the test and quiz. However, you do need to know how to use it and where the letters are coming from. So, looking at a quadratic in standard form, which is ax squared plus bx plus c, you're going to plug in to find your solutions where x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, and all of that is divided by 2a. So, looking at an example, we have x squared minus 5x equals 4. Your first step is always make sure that the equation is in standard form. So if I rewrite this in standard form, that would give me x squared minus 5x minus 4 equals 0. Next, you want to identify what your a, your b, and your c value is. The a is what's in front of x squared, so in this case, this a is 1. The b is what's in front of x, so in this case, b is negative 5. And c is your last coefficient, so c is negative 4. Next thing you want to do is, using your formula of x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, is plug in these three values. So that's going to give me x equals negative 5 plus or minus the square root of negative 5 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 4. And all of that is over 2 times 1. And then last is just to simplify as far as you can go. So we have x equals negative and a negative makes a positive, plus or minus the square root. Negative 5 squared is 25. Negative 4 times 1 times negative 4 is a positive 16. And 2 times 1 is 2. So that gives me x equals 5 plus or minus the square root of 41 all over 2. Next thing you want to do is ask yourself, can the square root be simplified? 41 cannot, so then we can just leave our answer like this. Let's try another. So first step is to get it in standard form. So we're going to move the 1 over, so that's going to give us 2x squared minus 8x minus 1 equals 0. Our a would be 2, our b is negative 8, and our c is negative 1. So now I have x equals, going through your formula, negative your b, which is negative 8, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all over 2 times a. So that gives me x equals a negative and a negative makes a positive, plus or minus the square root. Negative 8 squared is 64. Negative 4 times 2 times negative 1 is a positive 8. And 2 times 2 is 4. So it gives me x equals 8 plus or minus the square root of 72 over 4. 72 is 36 times 2, so that can be simplified to 8 plus or minus 6 radical 2 all over 4. Now if you look at 8, 6, and 4, they're all divisible by 2, so you can actually simplify that to 4 plus or minus 3 radical 2 all over 2, and that's where you would leave your answer. On C, it's already in standard form, so I have that A is 1, B is negative 6, and C is 10. So x equals negative 6 plus or minus the square root of b, which is negative 6 squared, minus 4 times a is 1, and c is 10, all over 2 times a, which is 1. So that gives me x equals a negative and a negative makes a positive, so that's positive 6 plus or minus the square root, that's going to be 36. Negative 4 times 1 times 10 is negative 40, all over 2. So that gives me x equals 6 plus or minus the square root. 36 minus 40 is negative 4, all over 2. Square root of negative 4 simplifies to 2i, so that gives me x equals 6 plus or minus 2i over 2. And 6 and 2 are both divisible by 2, so you can reduce that to 3 plus or minus I. And that's where your answer will be left. Part D. Got to get it in standard form, so I'm going to add the 2x over here, and I'm going to add the 1 over here. So that's going to give me 4x squared plus 4x plus 1 equals 0. That tells me that a is 4, b is 4, and c is 1. So x equals negative b, so that's negative 4, plus or minus the square root of your b squared minus 4 times a times c, all over 2 times a. So that gives me x equals negative 4 plus or minus the square root. 4 squared is 16. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 16, all over 8. So that gives me x equals negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 0 over 8. Well, the square root of 0 is just 0. So then this is really just x equals negative 4 over 8, and that reduces to x equals negative 1/2. And one more, solving using the quadratic formula. It's already in standard form, so that tells me my a is 4, my b is 3, my c is 2. So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all over 2 times a. So x equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 9. Negative 4 times 4 times 2 would give me negative 32, all over 8. So x equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root. 9 minus 32 would be negative 23, all over 8. Negative 23 simplifies to, or the square root of negative 23 simplifies to I radical 23, so that's negative 3 plus or minus I radical 23, all over 8. And there's your final answer. Next, we're going to talk about the discriminant. So the discriminant is the part of the quadratic formula that you can use to determine the number of real roots of a quadratic equation. Now, this is not specifically given to you on the formula sheet. However, since the quadratic formula is on the formula sheet, if you know where it's located, then you do have the formula given to you. Now, the discriminant is just what's in red here. It does not include that square root. It's just b squared minus 4ac. So, what does this tell us? If you solve b squared minus 4ac and you get something greater than 0, that tells you that you have two real solutions. So the graph would actually cross the x-axis in two places. If you solve b squared minus 4ac and you get 0 itself, then that tells you that there's going to be one real solution, so you would only see it cross the x-axis once. And if you find out that the b squared minus 4ac is less than 0, then that tells you that there's two non-real complex solutions. So that goes into the imaginary numbers. So it says find the type and the number of solutions for the equation. So first step is to put it in standard form. So I'm going to move the negative 4x to the other side. So that gives me 0 equals negative 3x squared plus 4x minus 4. So now I know that the A is negative 3, the B is 4, and the C is negative 4. And since it just wants to know the type and the number of solutions, then that tells me I just have to use the discriminant, which is b squared minus 4ac. So that's going to be 4 squared minus 4 times negative 3 times negative 4. So 4 squared is 16. Negative 4 times negative 12 times negative 4 is going to be negative 48. And then 16 minus 48 would equal negative 32. Now, because this value is less than 0, that tells me that there's two non-real solutions, or you can write two imaginary solutions. Either one would be correct. Let's try another. Put it in standard form. So it's going to be x squared minus 12x plus 36 equals 0. A is 1, B is negative 12, C is 36. So B is negative 12 squared minus 4 times 1 times 36. Negative 12 squared is 144. Negative 4 times 1 times 36 is negative 144. And 144 minus 144 is 0. So since the discriminant is equal to 0, that tells you that there's one real solution. And our last one with this is get it in standard form. I'm going to change colors here so I don't mix up the two problems. That's 3x squared minus 10x plus 3 equals 0. So A is 3, B is negative 10, C is 3. So we have negative 10 squared minus 4 times 3 times 3. So that's going to be 100 minus 36. So that comes out to be 64. So since that number is greater than 0, that tells me that there's two real solutions. Okay, so let's put some real-life applications into this. It says an athlete on a track team throws the shot put. The height y of the shot put in feet t seconds after it is thrown is modeled by y equals, and I'm just going to write this as I read it, y equals negative 16t squared plus 24.6t plus 6.5. And it says the horizontal distance, which is x, is between the athlete and the shot put is modeled by x equals 29.3t. To the nearest foot, how far does the shot put land from the athlete? Well, how far is a distance, so it's wanting the horizontal distance, which is x, but you can't find x without knowing t. So the first step is to go back to the equation y equals negative 16t squared plus 24.6t plus 6.5 and solve this for t. So we're going to set this equal to 0. And because there's decimals involved, I'm not even going to try and factor it. I'm going to go straight into using the quadratic formula. So I know that A is negative 16, B is 24.6, and C is 6.5. So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. So this can give me x equals negative 24.6 plus or minus 24.6 squared is 605.16. Negative 4 times negative 16 times 6.5 gives me positive 416. And all that is divided by negative 32. So that tells me that x equals negative 24. I'm sorry, this should not be x. We're solving for t, not x. Go back and change that. T, t, t. Negative 24.6 plus or minus the square root. You add these together, you get 1021.16 all over negative 32. So in my calculator, I'm going to estimate what the square root of 1021 is, 0.16. So that's t equals negative 24.6 plus or minus. That comes out to be roughly 31.956 all over negative 32. So now you have your two answers here that you have to break up. T equals negative 24.6 plus 31.956 divided by negative 32. And if you type that in your calculator, you get that T is roughly negative 0.23. But we can't have a negative amount of time, so that answer is extraneous. So then we also have that T equals negative 24.6 minus 31.956 all over negative 32. And that answer comes out to be roughly estimated to be about 1.78. So that is a valid answer for the amount of time that something is in the air. So then once you have your t value, since you're wanting the horizontal distance is in the equation of 29.3 times t. So you're going to take that answer and plug it in for t. So you find out that the horizontal distance, which in this case was x, is 29.3 times 1.78. And if we take that answer and round to the nearest foot, it's about 52 feet. Let's try one more. Now we have a pilot of a helicopter plans to release a bucket of water on its forest fire. The height, y, and feet of the water t seconds after release is modeled by, so I'm going to go ahead and write that out. Y equals negative 16t squared minus 2t plus 500. The horizontal distance x in feet between the water and its point of release is modeled by x equals 91t. Then we have that the pilot's altitude decreases, which changes the function describing the water's height to y equals negative 16t squared minus 2t plus 400. To the nearest foot, at what horizontal distance from the target should the pilot begin releasing water? Okay, so the whole point of me going through this was I started off with just writing out the three equations they gave me, but which one of these do I really need to solve for t? If we're talking about it decreasing and wanting to know when it's releasing the water, then this is no longer important to us. So the only equation that we have that we need to solve for t is the second one, the negative 16t squared minus 2t plus 400. So if I solve it using the quadratic formula, you know that a is negative 16, b is negative 2, and c is 400. So t equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over all over 2 times a, which is negative 16. So negative and a negative makes a positive 2, plus or minus. Negative 2 squared is 4. Negative 4 times negative 16 times negative 400 gives me a positive 25600 all over negative 32. So now we have that t equals 2 plus or minus the square root of that's all over negative 32. Type that in your calculator to get an estimate of what the square root of that number is. So that gives me 2 plus or minus roughly 160.012 all over negative 32. So now I know that t is 2 plus 160.012 divided by negative 32, or t equals 2 minus 160.012 divided by negative 32. This first one, when you type it in the calculator, you get a roughly negative 5.06. Well, we can't have a negative amount of time. So t equals, on this one, if you type it in, you get 4.94 roughly. So that makes a reasonable amount of time. And then go back and plug it in your horizontal distance equation of x equals 91t. So x equals 91 times 4.94. And you get that the horizontal distance roughly is 449 feet.